I need some makeup? Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Holy Comforter Bible Study. We are doing our big questions, and the big question we're doing tonight is, what about other religions? The other question is, does everybody go to heaven, or as Jerry put it, does everybody go to hell? That's a great question. So when we sort of put all the things up on the board that we thought might be interesting to talk about, this was one that every group wanted to sort of address about different religions. And I just wanted to open questions. Do y'all have relationships or friendships with anybody who practices another faith? Do you talk about spiritual matters with them? And how should Christians approach other religions? So do y'all
yes, no, and cautiously.
Yes, no, and cautiously. So you have friends that are of other religions, you just don't talk about religion.
We do some.
You might.
We do. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask what faith they practice?
Well, Catholic, Lutheran.
Well, that's
That is different
well,
faith.
we talk about
Yeah, I mean,
Muslims and
we can talk about whatever you want. I mean,
Oh, I was one.
denominations.
Oh,
yeah. Well, no, but I mean, but sometimes the people closest to us are the ones that are actually farthest from us. Do y'all have any?
I mean, I have relationships with people.
Yeah.
From atheists, Hindu, Jewish.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have or will talk about spiritual matters with them. And for the third one, I would say Christians should approach other religions with respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have friends who are Jewish, and I grew up, my best friend was also Jewish.
Mhm.
And so there were conversations, but
Mhm.
I don't know that I've really had an in-depth conversation with someone that was Hindu or Muslim.
I took a really good course at seminary that was half Muslim and half Christian. And the ground rule was that we weren't talking about what we believe, but how we practice our faith, which was interesting. So we talked about how they pray, how we pray, even down to what are your funeral customs. It was interesting to sort of approach it that way.
I find it obviously it's easier to talk to ones of the Jewish faith.
Mhm.
A lot of foundational, fundamental
Mhm.
components. But I know a number of couples that spouses, one's Jewish and one's Christian.
Right.
And I really struggle with that one.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with children coming
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
That one I really
Yeah.
really struggle over.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my college roommates, a very good friend of mine, is Jewish, and I don't know if we ever had an intentional conversation. It would often just sort of
Yeah.
come up, and again, a lot of it was practice. Like I'd be like, we'd be going out, and I would order a cheeseburger, and he would not, and it would be like, duh, But I would wonder, like, why did I get a cheeseburger? Oh yeah, that sometimes it's the subtle things that speak volumes.
Our son's one of his best friends in junior high was Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
and they would go through the fasting period.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so they were playing football in the afternoon.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Russell we tried to, several times would not eat because he would sit with him, and when he was, but finally, the young man was telling him, what he'd had before sunrise, so he was like, well, then I'm going to eat lunch.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how this works. But it was,
Okay,
they learned
yeah.
a lot about each other those times.
Very cool. Have y'all ever been to like a mosque or a synagogue or a Hindu temple? Yeah.
Never in a mosque.
Yeah.
Been to a Jewish temple.
Yeah. I had to go to both in seminary. I had to go to a Hindu temple and a mosque. It was interesting, sort of seeing the Hindu temple was like I didn't understand it at all because there's many different shrines all over the place, all sorts of things going on. At least in the mosque, it was like, oh, okay, this looked kind of familiar. People are in rows; they're all doing the same thing at once. Okay, and I have a note here. Almost all of this conversation revolves around questions of going to heaven, but perhaps we also need to consider life on earth. Can people of other religions live holy lives? Because a lot of times when I talk with people about other religions, it gets to, well, are they going to heaven or not? And I want to say, well, leave that to God. Let's take this step back and say, what is their life like on earth? And that gets to the practices and things like that. But we're going to talk about heaven, hell, salvation, all that sort of good stuff. Yeah. Okay,
but frankly, because we talk as Christians about going to heaven,
right?
So why should we exclude that from the discussion?
No, we shouldn't.
Not this discussion,
right.
But when you're talking with others,
right?
Because it is running through everyone's mind.
Yeah, no, it is.
Well, if this is the only way, if this is the only way to heaven,
yeah.
What about these guys?
Right.
But it's not going through everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Buddhists don't talk about going to heaven.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
They talk about trying to live as good a life as they can on this so the next one won't be quite so bad.
Yeah.
And eventually, if you get down to it, they're going to nirvana, which is not heaven. It's just, whoop, they're gone.
Yeah.
They don't have to come back.
I mean, should Christians even be focused on talking about going to heaven?
Yeah.
I mean,
We're not the judge.
if that's said, focus really should be while we're here.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling for the next over, I'm going to be saying a lot of really unpopular things, so I'm just going to throw that
No, whatever.
Because I have some really unique views on this topic. I did
No.
not know this was the question.
Hey, that's all right. It's all good. It's all good. No,
You might not have come.
no, come on. No, and I think that's the other thing too. Somebody asked this morning, like, well, do people believe these things in the church? I'm like, man, people believe all sorts of things in the church, so it's okay if we disagree. So yeah, no. So what I think is the question should entail everything. So yes about right now, yes about sort of whatever, post death, I suppose. Okay. So these are the three sort of traditional ways Christians have approached people of other religions. And I think it's important as we're talking about this that the word, maybe this won't show up on the screen. Yeah, like salvation. It entails both going to heaven as in sort of salvation, but it also can mean healing, sort of like right now type healing. It comes from the word salve, like you put on a burn. And so like when Paul says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, that can be something that's done here right now. So salvation isn't just about sort of passing the test. It's about sort of the totality of our lives. So same word then when we get the save. Okay, so number one, exclusivist. Only those who profess a Christian faith can be saved. Reasoning, one of the sort of lines you always see is Gospel of John here. I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The counter argument, what brand of Christianity are you talking about? What if God only accepted one type of Christian over the other? And we know this, that there are Christian groups that say, well, we are the true church. Everybody else is not part of the true church. So the counter argument is like, well, if we're going to be drawing lines, where do we start drawing lines? Do you have any sort of gut reactions to that?
Well, reading straight from John is the belief in Jesus is the only one.
Right.
So that, even though different denominations may have different
Mhm.
foci.
Mhm. Okay, well, wait till we get to more of John's gospel. Yeah.
We've got
Yeah.
2 other
Yeah.
John.
Yeah.
sections.
So this is why I chose all from John, to make it as aggravating as possible. The inclusivist, everybody is saved regardless of faith. Reasoning, John 3:17. Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. And that the word for world is cosmos. So it's not even just people. It's an inclusivist can take this to the fullest possible extent and say, this is mosquitoes and dinosaurs and galaxies, amoebas, whatever is in God's cosmos will be saved, is being saved through Jesus. Yeah. Aliens, whatever, you can sort of take this as far as you want. And then the third is the sort of the anonymous Christian. Those who do good, even in the name of other religions, are saved because they are serving Christ, even if they don't know it. Reasoning from John, I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. The counter argument is the smacks of paternalism, that we get the name who belongs to Christ and who doesn't. That's sort of like, oh, wait.
That was taken a little bit out of context. So.
This passage?
Yeah, the last one there.
I mean, the thing is, they're all taken out of context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, because this often comes up. So, you're talking about like, so are you telling me that Gandhi isn't saved? And so
you know what Gandhi had to say about Christianity. He could be a Christian if he'd never met one.
Right. He's like, I like Jesus, just not his followers. Yeah, Gandhi said something like that. Yeah. But so it's that sort of question. The inclusivist position sort of takes into account, we've always heard this sort of the hypothetical, the people living in the jungle that have never heard about Jesus, what happens to them? Are we saying that they're condemned? Because
that's one that always used to bother me.
Oh yeah?
That was always bothering me, especially when I was living out in the Far East. It just bothered me. How can these people that have never, ever heard of anything be sent to hell just because they haven't heard? It's not their fault. It's our fault.
Right. Well, and then the inclusivist account also takes in the just sort of cultural differences, that we were born where we were in a Christian environment. If we had been born in Yemen, or if we had been born anywhere else that
been brought up as a
right, we would have been brought up,
especially a Muslim, because that's so much education from birth that's just rote.
Yeah, but it could be anywhere. It could be you pick the culture. Yeah. So those are the three sort of arguments and counter arguments. The inclusivist probably has the most subcategories that an inclusivist might say, well, I believe, everybody, including the aliens, are saved. An inclusivist might say, well, I believe everybody of an Abrahamic faith might be saved, because that's the sort of God that we acknowledge. Or, all Christians would be saved, even the Catholic, or, whatever, sort of. So the inclusivist has a lot of different sort of subcategories. But those are the sort of three classic ways that we've approached this.
How do you feel about it?
I'm not going to, no. I have a lot of different feelings on it. And to me, I think number one is I do not want to presume to sit in God's judgment seat. That
Is that a cop out?
yeah, probably, but no, it's not a cop out.
No,
No, the fine line between cop out and humility, right? But I think me presuming to know sort of that person and their life and what God says. Jesus says, take the log out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your neighbor's. And so for me, I think we need to think about these things because it sort of it helps form us, but really for the daily life, the sort of life of devotion and prayer, it's I never really think about these things.
Jews, for instance, are they going to go to?
Okay, we'll talk about them in a second. We're going to get because as we sort of said that there's some things going on there.
Well, I still think, I think if we spend our time worrying about these things or being in judgment that we're really not to be in judgment of,
Yeah,
we're probably not living the life that we're supposed to be living.
right.
There's a lot of energy that could go to that in our job.
Right. Yeah, and we've seen that. We've seen churches behave like that, where it seems that it's all about the other, what other people are doing, and if they're going to hell or not. It's like, well, that seems to be a lot of wasted energy.
It also seems to me like I don't want to make that decision for somebody else. I don't know how
Yeah.
you're going to get to heaven.
Right.
You know, I know how I think I'm going to get to heaven,
Right.
but I don't think I have the right to tell someone who's Jewish that,
Yeah.
nope, I don't think you're going to make it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that.
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't really know their life.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
So
don't.
you're making a judgment on.
So y'all sound like the sort of anonymous Christian position. A lot of people will claim that C.S. Lewis belonged to this. He's the one. He has this line that the gates of hell are locked on the inside. That sort of we put ourselves in hell, and that there's always the opportunity to leave, which I think is a sort of a quirky little line. Did y'all read the book by Rob Bell, Love Wins? Anybody read that? No.
No.
Do y'all know who Rob Bell is? You know who Rob Bell is? He's a sort of non-denominational pastor, preacher, speaker, sort of a big name in that world. He wrote this book called Love Wins because it was like his church was doing like an art show. Did you hear the story? His church was doing an art show or something, and there was like a quote by Gandhi, and it was attributed to Gandhi, and somebody had written below it like reality check, Gandhi's in hell. And so it caused him to have this sort of, he went through this sort of process of writing this book called Love Wins to sort of explore some of these issues.
Well, what about something that's not even mentioned here? Is when Christ died, he went to hell.
Yeah.
He died and went someplace
Right.
for 3 days and came back. What was he doing during that period?
Yeah, y'all have heard of this tradition, the harrowing of hell, that Jesus goes to hell and preaches to the souls in hell? Yeah. There's another tradition. Y'all know who Origen? His name is Origen. I'll write it down because it's sort of he's got a very strange history. A 3rd or 4th century theologian. As I understand it, he even believed that Satan and God are reconciled in the end. So taking universal salvation, inclusivism, to his logical, what some might say the logical slippery slope, whatever, to the end, that even Satan is reconciled. There are traditions that Pontius Pilate becomes a Christian. There's all sorts of sort of
The happy ending.
right, exactly, yeah. Mike, what do you think? Can I pick on you?
Yeah, I don't think my view falls under any of those three.
Okay.
Maybe it's number 2, I don't know. But when I was studying at the Christian college through all the religious courses, how I basically ended up reconciling everything is I try to not keep God in a box because I don't feel like we can fully understand basically, little of anything. So I view it more like a wheel that has spokes. And, God's in the center. There's Christianity is one spoke. And I don't know what the spokes are, but
Okay.
maybe Muslim faith is another spoke, maybe Hindu is another spoke. But because I feel that God can use anything to bring people to Him. With Christianity, that's through Christ. And then I think each person has their own path before them to direct them to God. So for me, that path is Christianity. That is my path, and that's what I'm intended to follow. Someone that is born in the jungle or that's in the Middle East, whatever, perhaps they have a different path that was meant for them, but that still draws them to God.
Okay.
So, but this, for the inclusivist, it says everybody is saved. I still feel like people have choices. And so there's people that have a path that was intended for them. If they don't choose that, well, now they've got to be reconciled for their choice.
Interesting.
So I don't feel like everyone's saved,
Yeah.
but that I have a hard time saying that God couldn't use other faiths or religions to bring people to Him.
Right.
That
Right.
way.
Right. No, and that's one of the sort of traditions in Christianity, is saying that, sort of taking on what you said, that Christianity is the most right, but the other religions are not totally wrong, but less right.
I don't feel that.
Okay. Yeah. No. It's sort of what you're describing is not that, but it's probably more similar than, say, the exclusivist.
Right. So how would you categorize that?
I have no earthly idea. Yeah. No, but what do y'all think about this?
I call it the Mikovist.
The Mikovist? Yeah.
I think that's sort of
there-
what I
there is,
believe as well, because my real feeling is that I don't know what your path to God is like, and I have a really good friend who's an American Indian and a spiritualist, if you will, and whom I to say that he doesn't have the same kind of experience that I have. I don't know what he experiences.
So this changes, kind of going off that, the question earlier about, how should Christians approach other religions?
Right.
Now obviously I don't feel that atheism would be a spoke, because that's the complete opposite of it. But so, my Jewish friends or my Hindu friends or whatever, when I see that they've got a faith and they're connected to that, I don't mind having conversations about faith in general. This is my faith, this is your faith, learning about that, learning about their faith. But if that's their path, is it right for me to intrude on that?
Interesting. Yeah.
Versus if someone is not on a path, then I feel very comfortable showing them the path that I feel is for me.
Because of course you bring up the point then is, what do we say about missionaries, evangelists, things of that nature? Then sort of why spread the gospel?
I think there's no problem in showing people your path. And if they are open and receptive, and if God wants to use that path to draw them to Him, then He will do it. I mean, we don't say people are drawn many ways. That's the Holy Spirit. So we can evangelize and share our path with people, but the whole where it starts getting, my way is the only way, or trying to be forceful with it, maybe God's using another path.
Yeah.
So I don't know,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's probably not the most popular thing to
Yeah,
say.
it-
The
but-
support of what Mike just said there. I think there's a lot of people in this world, and this bothered me for years when I wasn't sure I was a Christian or not, that missionaries out in the field destroyed other faiths, but they never succeeded in imparting their faith.
Mm,
So they wound up with people that didn't really care much, didn't know where they stood. I worked with a group of people that came out of Christian schools in Bangkok. Most of my staff in Laos were people out of that. Every one of them, I don't know that they were real Christians, but they definitely were not Buddhists either.
interesting. Yeah.
And that, I don't know, it bothered me for years.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and again, that's coming back to what we were saying earlier, that if we frame this conversation, it's how you frame the conversation too. Sort of, is this about sort of holiness, or is it just about sort of, post-mortem? It's how you frame that conversation.
So is this like, would this be considered heresy? Because I'm always very shy to like share my opinions on this. Because
Oh,
I'm like,
I mean, that's the issue, is that there are so many different strains of thought within Christianity, all have which been classified as orthodox or heretical throughout history. It's sort of hard to say which one's heresy and which one's not. So, I
possibly.
yeah, but we're all probably possibly heretics, right? I mean,
Thank heavens the Inquisition's over.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a tough question. So again, I think it also comes back to just, it's like Michael Jackson. We've talked about this before, the Michael Jackson song. It all starts with the man in the mirror. That if we can't sort of not control, but if we can't be sincere and authentic in our own life of faith, then, what right do we have then to sort of start telling other people how they should live?
You would be a good Baha'i. They believe there's good in all religions, and they accept. We think we look for the good in all religions.
Yeah.
And I worked with one family once, and believe me, it's hard to think that they were going to go to hell. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I was sure they were a lot better Christians than I was at the time.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. If you turn to the back. So this is taken out of the parable for this Sunday. Jesus says, "Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you, chief priests and Pharisees, and given to a people that produces the fruits of the kingdom." Passages like that and others have been taken throughout history to the extreme end to say God has now abandoned the Jews, and that this is what's called supersessionism, that we have superseded the Jews. And we know the sort of the horrors committed against the Jews, not just in the 20th century, but in the Middle Ages as well. That, as the Crusaders were going to the Middle East, they oftentimes stopped in France and Germany and killed Jews on their way, because the sort of what they called them was Christ killers. And so I want to, if you could open up your Bible, John 19. in the end of 18, actually. End of John 18. So this is just about when Jesus is to be crucified. After Pilate had said this, oh, here, y'all have a different version. Will somebody read just the end of chapter 18?
Starting where?
Oh, sorry, verse 38.
38,
Yeah.
okay. What is truth? Pilate asked. Then Pilate went out again to the Jews. He said, I find no basis for any charge against him, but it is your practice for me to set one prisoner free for you at Passover time. Do you want me to set the king of the Jews free? They shouted back, no, not him, give us Barabbas. Barabbas had taken part in an armed struggle against the country's rulers.
Okay. And then going a little bit farther down, and we don't have to read this, but it's put into the mouth of the Jews shouting, crucify him, crucify him. I mean, we know this Good Friday, Palm Sunday, this is what we read. And this has been taken to persecute, and do all sorts of atrocities against Jews. But so textually speaking, though, it's very interesting that word there is actually Judean. It actually it's for the people who are actually living there in Judea. We've translated it as Jews, but the Greek word can be Judean, the people who are actually living there. So in the same sense, the example I gave this morning was, the Americans fought the British at the Battle of Saratoga. Okay, well, they're not talking about us Americans. They're talking about, people who lived 250 years ago. So it's just really careful that we have to say, when it says the Jews, that doesn't mean, here we are in 2014, they're guilty of this. It doesn't mean that at all. But it's been taken to mean that over the course of the centuries, that we as Christians have to be really careful about this to make sure that we don't fall down into that trap. I'm sure we've seen stuff like this. It shouldn't be a surprise to us, sadly. So there are some people who feel that in new translations of the New Testament they should translate as Judeans, where it actually says Judeans. Of course, these people were Jewish, but it locates them in their time and place rather than just this sort of, well, we have Jews today. That sort of thing. Oh no, I just lost my train of thought. I had a great comment. Okay, sorry, I totally lost it. Do y'all have any sort of reflections on?
Not as great of a comment you had. So.
Oh, this is what it was. Yeah, no, I remembered it. God, that took me a second. Especially because what we see now, we oftentimes we imagine, okay, there was Judaism and then there was Christianity. But it's really important to remember that at the beginning they were intertwined, that you even have after the ascension of Jesus, the disciples go back to the temple to pray. I mean, Paul goes to the synagogue. So that it was not sort of two separate things. And that, when we really look at it, it looks more that God has taken the vine that's Israel and grafted us onto it. So there's the people of God and we are grafted into it. It's not like God has said, I have a new people. God has said, I have more people. And so I think this is really important for us to remember, especially as we work through some of these issues.
Well, if you take, these verses out of context, separate them and take them literal,
Mm-hmm.
where it's saying Jesus is, the only way,
Mm-hmm.
then you're literally having to say every, hero of faith that led up to that, David and Moses and
Mhm.
you know all of these
Mhm.
people went out.
Right. Yeah. Right. It sort of it becomes fraught with issues. Exactly why we talked about what is the Bible last week, right? Sort of how to read the Bible. Sort of always take it in its context. Okay, so it's not on my discussion thing, but you brought up atheism, agnosticism. What do we say about atheists and agnostics? So Jerry and I were part of the meetup group at Starbucks, at which a number of atheists would join us. Supposed atheists, yeah, it's very interesting. But in a sense, I almost feel that the atheists there were more firm in their faith than any Christian I've ever met.
They had studied very much.
Yeah.
They could elucidate and had their arguments in mind. And it was hard to argue with them because they had it all planned out.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to be very careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was also very artificial, I thought.
It was a little weird. It's just, I found that they were so convicted in their faith. Have y'all come across people like this? People who say there is no God, and to me, it's an article of faith.
I couldn't help think that forceful expression of theirs was.
Yeah. Maybe they're just trying to rattle us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to rattle an Episcopalian.
I couldn't believe they really felt that strong.
Yeah. And I'm sort of like, man, yeah, like we're Episcopalians. Like, I'm not threatened.
Coming from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who knows?
Even last Monday about that.
Yeah. Have any of y'all read some of the what we call the new atheists? Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, ever sort of come across these people? It's really fascinating to read. And sort of my sense is, and of course, coming from the Christian perspective, is that everybody has a faith and everybody worships and prays to something. It could be themselves. It could be, it could be within Christianity. It could be money. It's whatever. That there are all these sorts of gods. And for me to hear somebody say there is no God, I'm like, well, it's just a matter of how you classify and define God. So that was just my reflection from Meetup. Yeah.
Who wrote that?
The New Atheist. No, that's like a group of people. Richard Dawkins is probably the most popular. He wrote The God Delusion.
Oh,
Have you read The God Delusion?
I've heard of that one.
I've not read.
Yeah, familiar with it. Yeah. I had to write a book review on it in seminary. Sort of. Interesting stuff. Sort of, stuff that a Christian can respond to. There was a great debate between him and the Archbishop of Canterbury before this, Rowan Williams. And it's like Rowan Williams was like, you don't get it. Faith is like poetry. Like, it's so packed with meaning and doesn't. It's not like a science textbook. We can't just write these things out. I thought that was really fascinating. Okay.
Well, the biggest issue there is willing to listen to the other side.
Yeah.
Well, that was in these discussions, that was one of the thoughts that was going through my mind, is that you can't argue with them because you've had experiences yourself that they haven't had.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to acknowledge them at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And God closed, what's the expression in Exodus? God
hardened their heart.
Hardened their heart.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think of that expression.
Interesting. Yeah.
Particularly the very early discussions.
Man, it was wild. It was really wild stuff. It was crazy. Any other sort of comments before I turn us off from YouTube?
What about the idea that looking at this from the hell side, that only people go to hell that want to go there.
Right, let's crack our prayer books open. If y'all have a few more minutes. I'll share. Okay, page 862 in the Catechism. It's that second question. What do we mean by heaven and hell? By heaven, we mean eternal life in our enjoyment of God. By hell, we mean eternal death in our rejection of God. And so the question that Mike brings up, really, because what you're talking about in your sort of concept is really then we have to ask who God is, what our doctrine of God is, who is this God that we're talking about? Is this the God we also find in Buddhism, or is it just the God we find in Christianity? So I think that's the next question. In this is, who do we say God is? And that gets this question too then, like, could everybody enjoy this God, or is this the God that we have defined? So, Jocelyn, or am I just word vomiting?
But how do we really define God?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Buddhists now. They've got this, they don't call him God, but this is this great feeling of the universe that you can become one with. And is that a lot different than what we really believe God is?
Yeah, I guess my last comment maybe will be, how it's like that saying, every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square?
Yeah.
Could it be that, in the same way with God, that
Could be, yes.
Yeah.
Because to me, they come very close to defining that in their meditation.
Right. And we talk about that. We talk about mystical union with other, with things that are beyond us. That's what communion is. So yeah, when you kind of get down to it, kind of like what Mike was saying, sort of sharing some of that stuff, I think is really important. Okay, thank you all for listening. You can email me, Jimmy@holycomforterspring.org, if you have any more questions. Thank you.